Hi, I'm Tom Childers. I'm back, and I wanted to discuss the opposite of statism, which is it's like three particular ideas that I've distinguished with three different words over here: freedom, liberty, and free markets. And there's an awful lot of overlap between all of these, the several of these ideas. There's particularly the idea of free being free markets and then also freedom. Obviously, freedom is central to liberty, but the usage of these terms has like different applications. Like freedom for freedom's sake doesn't have such consistent principles as applied with liberty, or does it lend towards governmental or cultural institutions that free markets would require or demand? There is a bit of freedom that is part of libertarianism, which is the resistance of any organization. And so it's like it's a demand to be free to experience life and fail or not, depending on your certain positions of the day. And it's the idea of freedom in its extremity very closely approaches tribalism and anarchy, because they the perversion of, well, it's just brutal to say perversion of freedom, but these a self-destructive freedom is a freedom that takes the path of truth and the idea of the sovereign individual, which is a complex thought, to tribalism, which is the right for you and your people to fight against other people so you can choose your own destiny. There's legitimacy in that, to all the way down to the actual hyperist localism, which is the individual, the absolute individual. And so if each individual has the complete say over what one's life is going to be as a conceptual model, without the regard of other people and the extension of that concept, then what you have is anarchy. And you can only trust somebody as far as you can throw them, and you can only protect that which you can kill to protect. And so that's a bit of what the minarchists and the libertarians kind of fantasize about. And so in order to change course and to collect back towards like a more stable society that has solutions that would be appealing to that sensibility, we want to go closer towards the sovereign individual, first the sovereign community and territories, and then the sovereign individual, which ought to honor and appreciate basically the responsibilities, bear your own responsibilities as a corollary to freedom. So it's like rights and responsibilities is a very commonly represented dualism that goes along with stated rights, and the inverse application includes the implicit responsibilities. And when a lot of like a few hundred years ago, there wasn't so much debate in the colonies as much as it was in like France during the French Revolution. In America, we didn't so much think that there were rights, or we weren't confused about what our responsibilities were. We thought that was just the obligations of life. We like the culture here in America. People engaged in life without having to spend a lot of energy explaining it or writing it down. And so that's like one of the major sources of confusion of like constitutional scholars today. They're not really good at understanding it because what they do is they try to read it and there's a big huge gap of like describing what they mean by pursuit of happiness. They basically thought that covered a lot of ground. Like what you would do to make you happy would be to live a satisfying life as a full, free person, achieving your potential and being part of your community. And they didn't really like write that into it, and so we kind of forget that. But that's like those are all like extensions of the idea of like sovereignty as a sovereign individual. And the results of, or the consequences of trying to pull together and organize so that not just you, but all the people that can or that are willing to be able to preserve sovereignty of the individual, that's where it starts to get like more complicated, because you have to start introducing like actual systems of governance, and people have tried different things way before, and people have been thinking about it, and the American colonies had a huge advantage than over a lot of other places in the world, because they actually started off with the working model of what they were going to do in advance of doing it. And basically English common law was carried forward like an awful lot of positive and real forms of self-governance that were emerging, and so the colonies actually were attempts to create their own ideal government. It was the new world in a fantastic way, and they did a fairly good job, and it wasn't very easy, because there's a lot of conflicts that come in not just governance, but in business dealings, and in making arrangements of people of different cultures and different climates. Not just the economic differences, but the traditions and the beliefs, and the whole idea of like religion versus philosophical principles that guide how you govern your life, and who your allies are, and what your principles are going to be. And so the idea of liberty is not a moot point. It's not a minor issue either. And let me see if I can't get any help from like opposite. There's another way of looking at trying to solve the problems that liberty solves, and the reflection across the circle is its opposite is a good place to go to find that out. And the space between absolute power and National Socialism attempts to solve problems bureaucratically top down. And so the idea of liberty is that it's an inverse principle, but of the same nature. And so what it does is it seeks to set up a set of solutions and a system that allows for solutions to be developed by the people who would then be protected to be free to solve their problems. And so it's not a passive system, because you have to chase down the problems and then create the system so that there's a framework that allows people to solve their problems. The proper use of power is to remove the improper use of power. And so there's a very strong correlation between the similarities of tyranny, of statism, independent of judgment of whether it's tyrannical or not, and liberty. Because the justice, whether or not the government's actions are just or not is a decision or evaluation that you can do. But only in the lens of whether or not it's liberty or tyranny. And it's to the degree that you allow people to have a coherent and a set rule of law that avoids arbitrary power and that enables the citizens to, and it's not just the individual citizens, it's the groups of citizens, it's the industries that are made up of citizens, it's the citizens who organized to form corporations of interests so that they can contribute in projects to develop. There's no limit to what citizens come up with doing, but we had chosen, and we continue to choose, the basis of corporations and contract law, business dealings, and those were selections that we made based on. There's a whole lineage of how it ended up being developed and adopted, and it's relevant, and it's kind of complicated, but we need to spend more time thinking about it, because it's the same problem that we would try to address top down, but without but doing it the hard way, the way that we might be able to solve it peacefully. And so that's the meaning, the essence of liberty. And the third part of this side that I'm trying to introduce here is free markets. And the concept of free markets, that's a very conservative idea, but it's not conservative in the sense of traditional conservative, even classical conservative. The idea of classical conservative is the formerly traditional conservative, whereas those who are conservative and prefer the traditional values, that's more of an American conservative here in America, or in just in the West. Classic conservatives were, they're kind of like the rhinos or neocons of today. They classical conservatives supported the rigged markets and corporate cronyism as it was. The people who had cornered markets and instituted monopolies. So we still have classical conservatives, but the traditional conservative, the TradCons, and the American conservatives of the Tea Party Patriots, they are not the kind of classical conservatives. They are avant-garde. They are at the forefront of many revolutionary new ways of looking at public transportation, urban development, education. Like there's a lot of people doing a lot of work, and it's oftentimes trying to figure out ways to introduce free market solutions, and that's like their buzzword for it. And the idea of free market solutions is the enabling people to solve their problems, which is a good way of understanding a proper use of government, which is to establish coherent and consistent non-arbitrary rules and laws. Now, that's different than regulation, but it serves a similar purpose. It's different than regulation though, but it's the same process. It looks from a distance to the layman like the same thing, like, oh, you're for regulation? Well, you gotta do something. Yeah, but you don't gotta do something, but you gotta set it up right. You know, you gotta set the rules so that the person that's making the decision on the rules isn't part of the, you know, it's like it needs to be agreed on by the participants, not the peanut gallery shouldn't have a say. Like, you're not even part of it. So, who asked you? And I think that it's very appropriate for cities, like certain cities, to have terrible schooling. Like, I think it's healthy for people to learn lessons by bad examples. And so I don't have any problem with some other like city that's far away from me having terrible rules, but I'd much rather there be like a division of like a restoration of states' rights, and then within states there'd be some states that are more successful than others by a division of within the state. And you know, I have a feeling that there's going to be a few booms coming to metropolitan areas that are going to be the source of massive investment that we've never seen in a long time. And so one of the good things about free markets is that it's almost like the only way you can guarantee. The sad part is it's not guarantees. You can't guarantee it. You just have to have a little bit of faith. With a little bit of faith, free markets create a source of wealth and prosperity that burns a mark on the earth that lasts culturally for eons. And so that's where we're trying to go.